Hi, my name is Brian Scanlon. I'm being the caretaker of Sligo Cemetery. People ask me down through the years questions in the cemetery, and when I get someone coming down the path and saying to me, can I ask you a question? I have learned from experience, expect anything, you know. I remember a woman coming down the path saying to me one time her father was dead 50 years, died a young man, and we opened the grave. It was a single plot, so we had to go down on his coffin, a box as we would call it. We go down on his box, and she comes down the path when the funeral was over. This would be the daughter, and we're after burying her mother. And the undertaker said to me, this lady wants to ask you a question. And I just, waiting for her. And she turns around and she says to me, was there any sign of daddy? So what are you supposed to say to that, I got this vision in my head. She thought he was sitting in an armchair smoking the pipe or something down below. And so you get every crazy question under the sun, ghosts, and have you seen this, or have you ever seen that, or what have you ever seen in a box? And the only thing I ever seen in a box was buttons and buckles, and a couple of false teeth. The only thing I've ever seen, Do I believe in ghosts? I've never seen a ghost in the cemetery. I won't say there's no ghost, but I've never seen a ghost in the cemetery, And the years also here have given me a great training and a great understanding of human thought and how the mind works. Because I am born and reared in this town, and I know 80% of the families, I'd say, in this town. I was going to say 90, but I'll say 80. I know their parents, their children, school, either between school, Sligo Rovers, I do a bit of running, brought up. There was 10 on my father's side, there was 9 on my mother's side. I think the whole hill where I was reared is related. So I know a lot of people. But I've learned down through the years that the people I know that I buried at a funeral, and when the funeral is over, where the person that is grieving has people around them for 2 or 3 weeks. But after about a month or 2 months, they arrive in here and they're left standing at the grave on their own. And everyone has gone back to do their normal life, their work, and carry on with things. And these people are left on their own. And they end up coming to me. And I've learned for the first couple of months of after anyone losing someone is just to listen, because these people are not in a good place. They're angry, they're feeling guilty, there's so much they should have done or shouldn't doing, if and buts. And if you're angry and you've lost someone and you're hurting, you can lash out, and one person in the family could be blaming the other person. And I'd be in a position where I would meet the other person maybe the next day, and they would be blaming the person who was in the day before. So the best thing of all I've learned is to say nothing in the first couple of months. Everyone will have a story, and everyone will blame someone else, and I believe it's part of grieving. There's the angry bit, there's the regrets, there's the acceptance, and where, you could take a side, and 2 months later or 6 months later, those two people arrive in arm together, and you're the bad person, so if there was a diploma for a grievance counsellor, I should have a master's, after 30 years of listening to people, stories, and I have to say that the majority of them would come back after 6 months and regret what they said and want me not to say it to anyone, or say they were sorry for what they said, But people die and belong to you that you love, and grieving is it's tough going, And particularly after a couple of weeks when everyone goes back to normal and they're left on their own, you have to be careful what you say and do. You just identify the person. You don't say nothing at all. You just listen, and they need someone to talk to. So if you just stand there, they'll go on and on and on, And then there's other times when you need to give a bit of advice, and a bit of comfort, I run a halfway house here. I had a min shed. This was the first min shed. You come up here on 10 o'clock, and there's only 2 working here officially, but there could be 8 drinking tea. And people will come and go all day, and they come in, out, and chat. They want tea, they'll get tea. If they don't, they don't. And they'll say, they'll tell you something. And if I had €1 for every secret I hold in my head, I'd be a millionaire. Because you get people's trust. If you're able to keep things to yourself and promise you won't tell anyone, you get trusted, and with trust brings respect, and so, part and parcel of the place, and most people will come good in the end. Give them 12 months, they'll come good, and they'll come round, and most families will make up. If there's families still fighting after a while, particularly over the grave, or who's in the grave, or who shouldn't be in the grave, or who put this on the grave, or I don't want that on it, and she put this on, it's usually, there's anger there, has nothing to do with the grave at all. There's other things going on outside the cemetery. And it's a battle of wills, who gets the better of who, and the grave is only used as a weapon, as a fight, and you have to realise that, If the problem with the grave is solved, there'll be something wrong somewhere else, they'll still be at it. So you got to keep out of all that. And I heard things about people were getting solicitors, and they were getting me to sign documents and statements, and it's only, there's a war going on, and you're only standing on, and you only started part of one battle, and some families will never make up, but there's a small majority, small majority. I'd say in my 35 years here, I'd say that maybe there's 4 families in the whole town who's fighting beyond 10 years, and I don't think they'll ever make up. Some people don't get on together, and they're just meant to be apart, and a row is as good as anything else to keep them apart, People ask me about memories and thoughts and burying people and all that. There's stories that happen that has nothing to do with actually opening a grave and closing a grave, and people crying in the cemetery, or priests and all that. Someone asked me one day, what was the most content or most satisfying day I ever had in the cemetery? And I have to say, it actually gives me tingles to this day. And the way it started out, and it only took, for the whole event, took 10 or 15 minutes, but it was magic, and I was sitting in this chair about 15 years ago, I'd say, 15, 16 years ago, and there was 4 or 5 people there. Christy Burns was here and a few more, and they were drinking tea and having the crack and laughing, and a knock came to the door, and Christy Burns opened the door. He was the nearest to it, and a woman said to him, "Are you Brian Scanlon?" And he said, "No, that's him in the corner." He's pointing in at me. And she said, I'm a nurse, and I've worked in Dublin for 40 years in a nursing home. And I said, "Okay." She said, "I was down to town with a lady, I was in the car with me, and I was down to 3 or 4 different places, and someone said, come up to you, and you might be able to help." And I said, if I'm able to help, I'll help, whatever I can. Couldn't figure out what I was supposed to help with, but I listened to the story. So she told me she was a nurse in a home for 40 years, and she made friends and came to like an old lady that been in care since she was 6 years of age. And this lady knows she had brothers and sisters, but they were separated when she was 6, and she was put into a home, and she's in her 80s now, and all she knows is that she's from Sligo town, and she had brothers and sisters, and she knows nothing else. And I said, "Well, where is she?" And she said, "She's out sitting in the car." I said, "Okay." So I said, "Bring her into me." So I got out of here because I was sitting with 4 or 5 men, and I said it would be a bit unfair for the lady, if she was in care all her life, to be brought into a room full of men. She might get nervous. So I left here and I went out and I stood in the front of the building there, 5 yards from the gate. And this nurse took this old lady out of the car, and she came round the corner and in the gate. And the minute I laid eyes on her, I knew who she was. I said, "Don't move. Stay where you are." I said, "You're Dunleavy." And the woman started rolling crying. And the nurse said to me, "How do you know she's Dunleavy?" I said, "I know she's Dunleavy. She's the image of her sister that I grew up beside." And her sister was Mary Jane Dunleavy, who married Jimmy Dunn. And I grew up beside the Dunns. And they had that dark skin. And she was just like her twin. And Mary Jane had passed away a couple of years before that. But the poor woman started rolling crying that I knew who she was, and I knew her name, even though no one had told me beforehand what her name was. And it was I got a niece of hers. I got Mary Jane's daughter to come up, Carmel, and there was a sister still alive in Bundog, and Kathleen. And Kathleen came down. So this lady found her family, her nieces and her sister, after 70 odd years, And that was the most satisfying day. I go home and sit down and I think about it. That was a magic day, you know. And you know, to this day, I don't know. I forgot to ask the nurse who told her to come up to me. Don't know. But these things, sometimes there's no explanations. But the minute I seen the poor woman, I knew who she was, you know. And she just, once I said her name, she started crying, you know, and it was magic. You know, she found her family, her niece, her sister, and you know, and that was the most satisfying day of my 35 years here, you know. There was another situation a couple of years afterwards where I was sitting over in the computer room we call over there in the portal cabin, and the phone rang, and it was social welfare from Stoke-on-Trent in England, and asked me, am I buying Scanlon? And I said I am. I'd been on to the council and I'd been on to the guards and a few other people, and someone gave me your number that you might be able to help. I said, okay. I said, what's? She said, we have a man here that passed away in a nursing home 3 months ago, and he's going to be buried very soon. We can't hang on to him anymore. He's going to be buried very soon in a pauper's grave, in an unmarked grave in Stoke-on-Trent, if we can't find out his family. Now, all we know is his name is John Francis Kivilin, and he had a little Bible with him, and inside the Bible was two names, Kivilin's and Sligo town, was written inside the Bible. And the only other thing we know about him is that he used to tell a story that his father was killed in the war, Second World War, in England. Now, he wasn't killed fighting in France or anywhere else, that he was killed in England. And that's all we know. And what do you think? Well, I said, leave it with me, says I think it was Monday. So ring me back Thursday at the same time. And I had 3 or 4 men down the town and women that I used to go to. They're dead and gone now. I used to go to for information. You know, they were one of these people, the kind of the oracles, you know, they'll remember who lived in the streets in 1930s and 40s when they were kids. And there was a lady in Church Street, she had a great memory, Peggy O'Mahony, but she was nervous when she wouldn't answer the door, and I used to go down and bang on the door and I'd say to her, hello Peggy, it's me, Brian from the cemetery. She'd say, you're the grave digger? And I'd say, yeah, and she'd shout, when the door never opened, she'd be shouting in the hall talking to me, and I'd be asking her questions, and she wouldn't come out to the door. But I used to get information on her. And Jack McLaughlin in St. Joseph's was a great mind. I used to go to him, and I had a couple of other people around the town. But this man, anyway, that was dead in Stoke-on-Trent, I decided to go down to Jack McLaughlin, and I went down. I said to Jack, did you ever hear of any Kivilins? And lived round, I said, I think they might have all went to England after the war, but the father was killed during the war. And Jack said, you know, there was a family of Kivilins living across the road in St. Bridget's, and upper St. Bridget's, and I think they all went away to England. So I came out of the house anyway, and I was looking over the street, and I seen Joe Galler going down the road, who used to own the pub at the bottom of Mailcoach Road, Sidney Galler's. And I went over to Joe and I said, did you ever hear of Kivilins living in Mailcoach Road? And he said, oh yeah, it was Kivilins living in there. He said the father was killed in an ammunition factory in England. And I said, did you ever hear of John Francis Kivilin? He said, yeah, he was in my class at school. And they went all off to England. I said, great, that's great news. Now, I have to at this point I have to tell you that my kids grew up with me working in the cemetery, and I decided a long time beforehand that I wouldn't go home sharing stories about the cemetery that I when they were young. So I never discussed the cemetery with my kids. You know, it was just, they never asked, they had no interest growing up when they were young, 8, 9, 10, 11, so I never got in the habit of going home and talking about work. Just when all this was going on, I never would have discussed it in the house. But at the same time, I was sitting up with my daughter around the same time, and my second daughter, Emma, she said to me, don't laugh, but I'm going to a fortune teller. So of course I threw the eyes up to heaven and waste the money, and I know you say that, so how much are you charging? And she told me a tenner, and I was joking, I said, give me the tenner and I'll tell you your fortune. And no, I'm sorry, no, I told you, she said. But anyway, so that's what was going on with my daughter at the same time. So get back to this man Kivilin. They rang back on a Thursday, and I said, look, this is where we are. I said, you can make a decision. I said, I have found out that there was a John Francis Kivilin lived on Mailcoach Road. A man told me that his father was killed in an ammunition factory in England during the Second World War, and that they all went to England when the war was over. Now I said, it's up to ye. I'll go and find the grave in the cemetery where the mother is, The mother came back and her brother, and I'll find them, you make a decision. So there was a couple of more phone calls. I rang them up and told them I found the grave in the cemetery, it's unmarked, there's nothing on it. And there was a young fella in it that died young too, and there's a mother in it. And what to do? So they said, well, the alternative is that we're going to bury him in a grave that's never going to be marked, and it'll be belong to the council, so they won't be able to put a headstone on it, and he'll be on his own. And I said, you know something? I said, send him home. I said, if he's, and I was joking, but I said, if he's buried with the wrong Kivilins, at least he's buried with Kivilins from Sligo, and he's home in Ireland. So they said, right, we'll send him home. So I was telling Joe Galler and a few other lads, Mark McLaughlin and Bug Rooney used to come up here regular. I said, this man is coming home now next week, and there'll be no one to carry the coffin. So Joe said, I'll go up and meet you at the gate. At the time I told them we're coming, and the two boys came up. So the hearse arrived a few days later, and there was no one with the hearse, only the driver, who was only worried about getting back to the ferry. So we took the coffin out at the gate. As we were taking no sooner we the coffin out, the hearse did a U-turn on the road, and he was gone back up the road, the Dublin road, out of town. And myself, Bug Rooney and Mark McLaughlin and Joe Galler carried this man's coffin in over. It was in over the other graves in a patch of grass in the middle of a big area. So we carried the coffin over, put him in the ground, and I threw holy water on him. We said a few prayers, and that was it. That was John Francis Kivilin home from England, anyhow. About a month later, I was sitting up in the house with the daughter, and we were chatting away. And I said to her, I said, Emma, did you go to the fortune teller? Are you going to meet a millionaire and look after your old fella for the rest of his life? And she said, no. She said, what did he say? Oh yeah, he was good. I think he's very good. He's very good. And you know something, Daddy, he has a message for you. I said, a message for me? He said, yeah. He said, she said, I never told them where you worked, but she said, I have a message for your dad. And I said, well, what's the message? Well, he told me to tell you that there's a person at his side here, and he's saying, thank him, tell him thanks for getting me home from England, and thanks for carrying me coffin to my grave. And that's the God's truth. And I never discussed it with my daughter. Never told them anything, even after the burial. So, it's hard to explain what's out there. We don't know. I don't try to think too much into it. There's been a lot of coincidences in my life when I believe there's someone sometimes watching me and minding me, and I'm a great believer in the Holy Well. I believe I'll go somewhere, but it might be pearly gates and the whole lot, but that's what happened with John Francis Kivilin, and I'm delighted he's home and he's in his grave, but that's what the daughter said to me, and I didn't discuss anything with her or any of the family about this man coming home from England, and so she was actually surprised and shocked when I told her what happened in the story. But that's all part of life. That's the mystery of it. Now, coincidences in life, how much of them are just coincidence, or how much of them are kind of laid out in front of you? This happened to me, and this is true, hard to believe, but a couple of years ago I bought a house. And I say now it's 7 years, July 17, so July 2017, and I was living in flats for years when my marriage ended, and I was lucky enough to get a few pounds together and buy a wee house. Actually, houses belong to relations of my own, Conlon's, Bertie Conlon's family, but I was trying to get into it because I was now paying a mortgage, and then I was paying a flat, and I was trying to get into it as quick as possible. So there was very little in it when I moved into it. I was taking everything out of the back of the car from the flat on the day I was moving in July. Any furniture that was in the house the Conlons left me, tables and chairs and a bed, fairness to them, they were very good to me. And I was carrying in bags of clothes and things out of a flat, and the phone went 2 or 3 times, Texas. Beep, 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 beep. And I put things down and I looked at the phone, and there was 2 or 3 big long texts from someone. And I said, God, can't be dealing with this the day I'm moving in. So I'll read it later. So I put the phone in my pocket and carried on. And I remember at 10:30 at night, there was actually a cement mixer in the middle of the floor because I was taking a wall down between 2 rooms. I had no television, but I had the internet in. I had connections in phone and internet, but I had no actually television. And I was sitting down, and it was July, and it was a great, great day, and it was 10:30 at night, and the sun was going down, and there was a ray of sun coming in the window, and the builders were in during the day, and I had a cup of tea, and I was sitting on a chair, and the dust was coming down, and I was going into me tea, and I put down the cup, and I came back after a few minutes, and there was nearly a crust of dust on top of the tea. And you know something, I said, you know something, it's my dust. You know, I was so happy to have my own little house. And I was sitting there with the sun shining in at me, and I drank the tea. But when I was drinking the tea, I remembered these texts I got earlier on in the day. So I took out the phone and I started looking through them. And it was basically a woman from England texting me, trying to find her grandfather. Sean Feely gave her my phone number. And in the phone, in the big thing, she explained that her mother was 10 months old and they left and went to England, and she had 2 older sisters with her mother, and her father died in 1944. His name was Verdon, and she had a sister in England, and she was a widow at this, and the father died, and the sister in England told her to come over, her grandmother to come over and to get work, because England was at war that time. There was plenty of work in the factories. Her mother was brought over to England when she was 10 months old with her 2 eldest sisters and her mother. Her mother was at Verdun, and her father died in 1944, but she sent me a photograph too in the Texas of a wooden cross in Sligo Cemetery where her grandfather was buried. And I looked closely at it, and I can look at a photograph and I can identify from the other headstones around it and the background and the houses in the distance of where roughly it is in the cemetery, you know. And I was thinking to myself, and I said, you know something, that cross is gone now, and there's a new headstone put on it. And the woman that I got all the dates for that headstone, when he lives up at the top of the road in the cemetery, and her son works with us in the council, and I have his phone number. So I sent a message back to this woman, and I said, this is a gentleman that works with us on the council. This is his phone number. His mother organised the headstone on your grandfather's grave, because there was actually 3 others in it. There was another brother and an older generation. I said, your grandfather's grave and your granduncles and 2 other members of the family. And I said, I know that her mother was Verdun, and so I said she could be a brother, she could be a sister of your grandfather's or a cousin of your grandfather's, but there's a connection. This woman was telling me in the first text she sent me that they lost track and they didn't know who's belonged to them and who's related to them, and her mother came, she was 10 months old, and she never kept any connection with the family in Sligo. So I sent back the message saying, I was sitting in my own house at 10:30 at night and all the dust, and I sent back and saying, this man has to be related to you and his mother. So ring this man's number, here's his number, and you've found your family. And the whole thing is solved. What you're looking for. So about a month later passed, and heard nothing, and the gentleman in question was driving the council truck down past the cemetery, and Philip is his name, and I waved him down, and I said, did any woman ring you from England? I gave her your phone number a month ago. No, he said, no one rang me. So I went back on here that evening, and I had Joanne's email, and I sent her an email, and I said, for God's sake, you never rang that man. And I said, do you want to find out these people or not? Do you want to get your relations and your family and want to know who you are? Her mother was still alive in her 80s. You know, do you want to find out? I said, you know, he's a lovely fella, just, you know, grab the nettle and fucking ring him. So she sent me an email back saying, I got cold feet, and I was thinking about this for years, and I just at the last minute I couldn't do it, and I put it off for a day, and once I put it off for a day, I put it off for a week, and then I didn't do it, and now I'm not going to do it. And I said, for God's sake, will you ring the man? Another couple of weeks passed, and I get this big long email one day from this lady, and thanking me. And she contacted Philip, and Philip put her mother on the phone, and Philip's granny and her mother were first cousins, and she's coming over in September, and she's going to meet all her cousins and all her family, and she's over the moon, and couldn't thank me enough. And I said, look, you know what you do, if you're in the cemetery in September, sure, I'll meet you, I'll see you in the cemetery. You'll be in to see your grandfather's grave anyhow. Oh, I will, I'll be there, I want to thank you very much in person, and only for you, I wouldn't have found this and I wouldn't have found that. And I said, okay, that's grand. So anyway, completely forgot about her. And September came anyhow, and I was leaving here on a Friday. I went into Londis to get a few messages at 3:30, and my next door neighbour, Georgia Crystal, rings me and says, there's a woman from England banging on your door, trying to get into your house. I said, banging on my door? Yeah. She said, I have to be now talking to her. And she said she knows you. She was communicating with you. You were in the cemetery. So I couldn't think who it was, and I want you to be banging on my door for. So I said, I'll be home in 10 minutes. So I left London and got in the car and came home, and lo and behold, the lady that sent me the text the first day I moved in was standing at my door. And I said, because I never told them where I lived or anything. So I said, Jesus, I thought you were going to meet me in the cemetery, and you must have asked someone where I lived down the town. No, she said, no, that's not how I arrived at this door. And she said, but it's great, fabulous that the shoe that lives here, and it's 1,000,000 to 1 chance. And I said, what are you talking about? It's 1,000,000 to 1 chance. She said, my grandfather died in this house, and my mother was born in it. And I said, no way. I said, hold on a minute. No, I said, your mother might have been born in Millbulben Terrace, but not in this house. There's 28 houses in Millbulben. She said, let me into the house and I show you. They got me into the house, took out the birth cert, and on the birth cert was 6 Millbulben Terrace. So the house that her mother was born in was the house I was moving into the first day she texted me. And she was thinking about doing it for years. What is the odds of that? Of all the houses in Sligo town, the one I'm moving into is the house her mother was born in. So such a coincidence. And she's come back to me every year, and she goes round the house, and she wants to go, there's only 2 bedrooms in it, and she wants to go into the big bedroom at the back, and she keeps saying, I was saying, this is the room your mother was born in now. Her mother's still alive. This is the room your mother was born in. And she keeps saying, oh, this is the room my grandfather died in. And I said, don't be saying that, because I'm sleeping in it. We'll stick with the room your mother was born in. And mind you, the room your grandfather died in. But it was just such a coincidence that she would text me on the day I was moving into 6 Millbulben Terrace in Sligo, and it turned out that was the house her mother was born in. What's the odds of that? And she comes every year and has a mug of tea, and her mother is still doing well, actually. So that's that. That's life.